Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Eye on Icon. It's been a while since I have gone around the ecosystem and interviewed some of our builders, and today I'm kind of very excited to have Brandon back on the show. Second time. Welcome, man.
Thank you. How's it going?
Yeah, good. So today we have you on for a different project, and I'm excited to, well, I've already taken part in the pre-sale, and I'm excited for you to break down what your new project's about. Do you want to first tell us who you are and then intro your project?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Brandon. I've been part of Icon for about the last 5 years now, over 5 years, a little bit before decentralization. Run the Foundry Box Media node and the P-Rep. And I've done a couple projects, worked on a few things in the ecosystem, but the newest thing is this INANIS INVICTUS, and truly my baby.
INANIS INVICTUS. Okay, so even David was getting it wrong. Haha, score. All the community picks on me and the way I say names, so haha, take that, Jack.
It could be that I pronounce it incorrectly too.
You know what? Don't you start. Icongrapher did this to me as well. Like before we started the podcast, I went through it with him. How do you say your name? He's like, there's no real way to say it. And then everyone obviously criticized the way I said it because there was a real way to say it apparently. So, oh, good times. No, okay, cool. So tell us a little bit about your project. I'm keen to know an overview of what it's about.
Yeah, so INANIS INVICTUS is aimed at basically kind of merging a tabletop gaming experience with NFT and blockchain technologies. And kind of what that means is what you would consider a tabletop game would be games that some people might be familiar with that are kind of based in Warhammer or Mage Knight, things that you would play kind of like a board game at your table with several other people. But in this particular case, it would be by kind of leveraging collections of NFTs that you've purchased that you can use in the game itself.
Yeah. So, okay, so you're merging two genres? Is that what, like, two like your Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing, but with your pieces and all that is kind of NFTs? Is that kind of a terrible?
Yeah. No. So in this particular game, it would be like you have a collection. Sorry, my dogs.
No,
you have a collection of units that you would get through asset pack purchases or trading. And these would be playable pieces in a player versus player match where you draft fleets of ships, with each piece having various stats and capabilities that define how it plays within the game mechanics. Okay. And so it's like a turn-based turn for turn combat game. And you could tweak it and make it as customized as you want because of the nature of tabletop games.
Yeah.
But the standard format would be like a death match between two players with equal fleets, or different compositions, but matched fleets in terms of power or whatever. So yeah, if that kind of helps square it up a bit.
That does. So when do you anticipate? So at the moment, you've got a sale going on for the packs. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So currently, what we have available, our launch on August 19th, a little over a week ago now, was to really kind of introduce the project, introduce the first set of units, ships, kind of how the stats work, get the gameplay rules out there. It's certainly playable at this point. A lot of the stuff needs to be refined and tweaked. Overall, this project is intended, or this phase of the project is intended to kind of provide a platform for the future of the growth of the game itself, which is multi-phase, as you kind of alluded to.
Yeah. How about this? Why don't you take us through the phases? Because I'm keen to understand, like, I have some quick fire questions I want to get at you, like, will the NFTs be upgradable and how would that work if that's the case? But before I jump to conclusions, do you want to talk us through how many phases and each of the phase, what you anticipate to happen?
Yeah, so we launched our phase one, which was basically the introduction of everything, like I mentioned, and we're just now kind of entering our phase two development, which is focused around providing and expanding the blockchain features. So the most prominent of those will be a gamified staking mechanic, where we're going to basically allow players to use their ships to form fleets, something we're calling task forces internally, to basically lock them, as an NFT and participate in kind of daily mini games. The format of that is still kind of in design, but ultimately it would provide everyone an opportunity to earn void tokens by leveraging their ships, and they would play through different formats of like mini games
Online. So these
online. Yeah,
okay, yep.
Correct. Yeah, and there'll be some other features. We're going to expand some of the online features, like adding an auction feature or a ship swap, and an offer mechanic, expanding some of our void liquidity functionality, which is actually what we're working on now to provide more use and value to the void token. And ultimately, the void token is meant to be kind of paired with the whole experience and allow you to leverage and access the various features both in game and kind of out of game. As time goes on, we'll be adding features such as an example, something that's actually coming relatively soon would be able, like a tier for tier ship swap, where if you have multiples of one ship but don't have another, you can swap a ship for a like ship in the same rarity category, and that'll cost a small amount of void. And later we'll look at upgrades for in-game items and vanity items and things like that once we have something playable out.
Okay, cool. So let's zone in on the void token. So you've listed, essentially it'll be used as a mechanism to swap ships between players. What other use cases do you anticipate the void token having within?
So specifically in the gamified staking mechanic, we're looking to actually have the ships take damage that will need repair. That'll be kind of like a burn mechanic on the token.
Yeah. Cool.
And there'll be also a planned feature for adding or upgrading ships with modules. However, modules will only kind of affect it within the game mechanics. It wouldn't be that you're necessarily upgrading your template, but that you would upgrade it for its capability within the gamified staking mechanic, and later, in a player versus player match kind of setting. Yeah. And that way, ultimately you could leverage. So it gives people customizability over their ships a little bit, based on the modules they swap in and out or whatever.
Are they like permanent buffs, or is it like, play 3 times and then it wears off and then you have to respend?
So we're actually looking at kind of a combination of both. Okay. So if and based on the rarity, so we're planning on having modules be kind of like an NFT feature as well. So some of that stuff's still kind of in design and may change, of course, but yeah, lots of ideas.
Okay, cool. So then I like that with the void token. I see what you're saying here. So swapping, but also you anticipate it being used for upgrades where it then burns the token. Now, while we're on the token, what are some ways to get your hands on the in-game currency? That's almost what it is, right?
It's I would like to call it more of like a platform currency, because this whole project isn't really just one type of game. It's meant to be kind of a collection of experiences. Okay. But ultimately, right now you get void tokens with each purchase of an asset pack, and that'll continue until there's a limit of 5 million tokens, or a supply of 5 million tokens. Okay. But the token, supply and demand is dynamic in some ways, similar to the icon kind of ethos. So the idea is that there is no max supply, but that it'll be balanced out by kind of a supply and demand in terms of how it's used within game mechanics and platform mechanics, and when it's purchased. Yeah. You can also get some on balance. It's listed. It's got a relatively low liquidity at the moment, which will continue to increase over time.
And And
go
your
ahead.
node, so you spun up a node, and is there voting bonuses or anything like that going on?
So we spun up a node, and the intent, we're actually working on the smart contract currently to manage the distribution of tokens, and that will hopefully be live in the next week. At which point people will be able to earn rewards in terms of void tokens. Purchased by the node rewards and distributed to node stakers. And one thing that hasn't been entirely talked about, there's going to be several incentive categories that are based on asset pack sales, secondary sales on marketplaces, and some of the void token usage will be redistributed to several categories, as a matter of fact, including node voters.
Yeah. Okay. So you're going to use the node rewards to buy from the LPs? Is that what you said?
Yeah. So similar to kind of Framed, their project has the protocol owned liquidity, which I thought was a fantastic idea. So congrats to them on that approach. The node rewards will be used to purchase. Almost 75% of the node rewards will be used to purchase from balance the void token back from the exchange, and 50% of the total of those will be used in liquidity support, I believe. So I have to look at the distribution. It'll be, but and then a portion of those will also be burned to help manage the supply of the token. And keep a price there. So we're working on that. It's we're looking to have an announcement about that in the next week or so, with a little more detail on exactly how all that will work.
Cool. No, that's exciting. Okay, so that's the token covered. Now, we've also talked a little bit around the online state with your mini games and how you envision with modules and NFT upgrades, and obviously how the void token comes into that. But right now we're in phase 1, and I suspect the offline is the offline gaming is probably more in focus and within everyone's reach with all the packs they've been buying. So can you share some insights there in terms of, so at the moment, is the board, like I read on the website, you need to have a bit of a map, the board that you would play on. You envision you'd want players to play offline, they could print their ships. How does all that work? Could you talk us through it?
Yeah, so kind of standard. I mean, anybody who's familiar with tabletop games would probably kind of get this, but I understand a lot of people don't. It's a relatively kind of niche area. So typically 70s, 80s kind of was like there's like an era of tabletop gaming. Tons of games came out. They all had these formats, but generally you have some sort of battle map, and you can get these online, but the end goal would be that we would be able to provide, either for sale or for print, appropriate sheets that can be used. But ultimately, you would need a sheet, and you can use tokens that are either printed, which we're working on, providing for the ships currently. That to track like ships and their orientation on a hex grid map, and then you would of course need a copy of the game rules and your ship sheets, and with those you would be able to play through a successful match. But I will say that that's kind of like the most crude starting point that we can have for this project. So a lot of what we'll be doing over the coming weeks and months will be to build tools that are kind of that bring a cohesion to the digital and the tabletop experience. And so one of those things that we started with is if you own a token now, you can go to the ship sheet and you have kind of like a very simple ship kind of schematic that shows all the stats. So one of the next phases for that piece of the site will be to actually develop a tracker where you can add ships to a tracking sheet and track their various hit points and weapon damages, even roll them. And so the intent will be that you can keep that instead of having to print a ship sheet, to manage your ships.
Okay.
And that's just one. There's several things that we're looking to kind of expand that experience and make bring the tabletop gaming experience kind of into the now rather than 20 years ago kind of thing. So
do you like when I first read, in my head I kept going to, is this one of those projects where you hope a future state tabletop, hold your phone and the AR avatar appears over the map of your ship?
So it's funny you bring that up because it's one of the, like, a few years ago I was involved with some friends and some acquaintances, professional acquaintances, I should say, to try and kind of build a version of like a tanks game that was AR enhanced. It would show up on the tabletop, and I've always been inspired by that experience, and I absolutely love the concept of doing that. So yes, I mean, in short, I would love to see this kind of go into that realm in the next couple years for sure.
Yeah.
And you did well. Absolutely.
Cool. So next week, got it.
Yes.
That's cool. That definitely first thing that came to my mind, the eventual evolution, especially of the tabletop style, would come to that. But cool. So in terms of, I'll keep coming in on with the board and stuff like that. When do you anticipate having a template available for people to kind of go to? And is there dice or some mechanic involved in terms of how the players determine,
So the basic mechanic is that you would have your ships and some sort of token trackers for the ships. You also have to track torpedoes and aircraft, which are like you would have like a token tracker for those, which we're working on kind of getting something out for people to use. As I was saying, some physical way to print them or even order them, but and dice will be generally involved if you're playing the most kind of Back to the Future version of a tabletop game. So it's all dice based, and that's kind of where the random element comes in. You would need a standard set of gaming dice to play that tabletop, and of course some friends. So it's hard to a couple people interested in taking that adventure with you. So
well, and you've got your own Discord, right? So
we do.
Fans of board games and stuff, if want to experiment and kick things off, can actually connect via Discord and get started.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Now, the lore. We've talked about all these things. I've found out about the game, future state, current state, AR state, tokenomics, but I haven't asked you about the lore. Could you? Do you want to talk through what when someone looks at it and goes and reads, the synopsis and goes, "Oh, this is going to hook me in."
Yeah, definitely. So I will be the first to admit the lore is kind of a ongoing work in progress kind of thing, mainly because this is meant to be an interactive experience. So it's not like you'll play through a story mode. However, our intention is to kind of introduce story elements through the ships and through our upcoming gamified staking mechanic, and that will help kind of frame the experience of what we're calling the Vega sector and what happened and what's kind of led to its current state of flux and war and all these conflicts in which players obviously they can take on any role that they imagine, but are what we would consider maybe mercenary outfits or for hire types of organizations that are doing these missions and one-off experiences or whatever for compensation. So I don't have anything specific that I would say in terms of the story other than that we're kind of leaving it open and looking to fill in the gaps through different interactive experiences to frame out the story. So okay. So my experience with board games of this style, well, apart from the traditional, normal family board games, everything else comes from Big Bang Theory and Dungeons and Dragons. And, yes.
And the takeaway was, while there's a Dungeons and Dragons kind of lure, everything else was kind of created by the head person who kind of, they created their scenarios, a story, and off they went. So that's the vibe I'm getting here. Kind of, you've got a theme overall, but then it's when people get together, they create the story that happens through the game they play.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing is, with collaborative games, that tends to be kind of the focus. Some people really get into it for the mechanics, but a lot of people really get into it for, there's like a storytelling opportunities. And as an example, you may get people that will tell some story with like a game that's as technical as this. It's like, this particular fleet of ships, happens upon a derelict in space, and this is what unfolds or whatever. But that was kind of like the typical scenario I would see growing up, with some of my more creative groups and friends that would play similar games. So
cool. Yeah. So do you hope, like, when you think about it, are you hopeful that you see people create their own unique stories and put them up so other users to play through it and things like that?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, and that's that's one thing we want to work on facilitating. Already, some people have asked, well, hey, can we, similar to what GangsterBet is doing, can we like add stories to our ships? And so I love that kind of stuff, and we'll definitely be looking at at providing that kind of feature set.
Yeah.
And I think one thing to kind of expand on that a little bit is, we're leveraging something called the Open Gaming License for our gameplay rules, which, if you're not familiar with that, is similar to like the MIT license for programming, where it's kind of like open source. And in terms of, you're allowed to reuse it, to modify it, as long as, you're not trying to distribute it as your own. Ultimately, it's meant to be flexible and changeable. So that's kind of, we'll be releasing and publishing it, officially in the future, and it'll be under that license. So.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Lots of exciting stuff on the horizon. So now, Brandon, before we caught up, you told me about Alpha. And everyone knows I love a lot of Alpha. Now, have you dished it? I feel like you've given me a lot, so I'm scared to ask. Is there more?
There is, yeah. So I mean, it's kind of like there's two parts. So one is in relation to what we're doing with our token liquidity. So kind of going back to that a little bit, I mentioned that there's some incentive categories. We're looking at actually providing an incentive for some of the NFT owners that would apply to the limited and distinguished ships. So that'll be coming out with the rest of the mechanics shortly, which will include benefits for supplying liquidity to balance pools, as well as voting for our node. And those incentives will include kind of kickbacks based on purchase sales now and in the future, and some of the mechanics as well. So that's one piece. I kind of touched on it, but the other is in terms of what we're looking at for the implementing the playable digital version of the game. And so a lot of that's still in design. We're early in terms of that, but I think we've kind of looked at something called BoardGame.io, which is a Node.js platform specifically designed for hosting online versions of board games. That's very flexible, and it looks like we're probably going to leverage that toolkit to build a playable web version of INANIS INVICTUS online. So
okay, I've kind of sorry, I wasn't being rude, I was actually
yeah.
Cool.
And what's cool about this is that we have every intention of kind of developing a feature-rich, like AAA version of a game. But that's obviously kind of on the horizon in terms of what would be playable. And so if we leverage something that's built on an open source platform that uses a kind of standardized information sharing, which is what this whole toolkit's for, we can actually leverage the gameplay mechanics and programming across different visual platforms. So
cool.
We wouldn't necessarily need to reprogram if we wanted to, say, build this in Unity if it leveraged the same, same stuff on the web, which is a huge benefit. And we're still looking at a long-term time frame, at least a year and a half, but I'm hoping that we can have something playable and testable sooner than our roadmap is indicating right now.
Cool. Is this what I have on the screen?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Now, I get what you mean. Then you're building off something that exists and can get it out on more mediums later on as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And one other benefit is that if we build it so that you can play, which I mean, if the plan is to build it so that it would be like a web version, that you could play from any web capable device, that would almost seamlessly integrate with like a preferred client type, where like it might be a Unity or a desktop game, and allow a similar experience with players playing on both platforms at the same time. So I'm sure there will be some challenges in terms of the technical, requirements for that. But after kind of a review of the Board Game IO platform, I really think that's the way to go forward with this. So
no, that's awesome. A lot of thought has gone into future plans as well. So that's also something I'm getting off our conversation today. Cool. Okay, Brandon, is there anything that we haven't? I know we jumped a few places, but overall, I've gotten a real good picture and idea of the project and where things are heading. I'm particularly excited. I mean, I love the board game aspect. I am excited about the when the web-based functionality gets built in. I think, for me, I'd love to just click a few buttons, destroy some people, and
I mean, ultimately, I mean, it's hard for people to play a tabletop game just because it legitimately takes a lot of time. It's involved tracking all this stuff. I mean, we would play so we didn't necessarily touch on this, but this is kind of heavily inspired by a game called Silent Death, which is a early 90s, late 80s era tabletop game. If you were to take the time to go look at it, you would find a lot of similarities in terms of the way it plays with INANIS INVICTUS. But those game matches would take hours. I mean, sometimes multi-day, kind of thing. So we're looking to kind of bring that into the digital space to make that much more seamless and enjoyable for everybody. So that we're excited for that too. That'll be the fun part.
No, same. And your entire everything you're envisioning it all running on Icon, right? It's predominant.
Actually, no. So Icon will be our home. All the NFT technology and the back end functionality will be Icon based. We are definitely going to be looking at bridging into different networks, expand our reach. But at the end of the day, it's built on Icon and it's going to stay there. So, but one of the biggest reasons for that too is because of the upcoming capability with BTP and the bridge, and it's much easier to start where the bridge starts rather than waiting for the bridge to come to you, kind of stuff.
No, understand. Awesome, man. Anything else?
No, I mean overall, I think that was we touched on everything we wanted to. Oh, actually, there is one last thing, and this is something that will be coming hopefully before the end of the year. Is we're looking to also provide an experience for people that don't really have an understanding of how crypto works or have an interest in the crypto side of it, by kind of abstracting away the crypto wallet side of it and letting people log in, trade, and buy their ships and play the game with just email and log in. So that'll be another thing too. So yeah.
So they'll email, log in, and then they just buy like with fiat. They'll have the option to use crypto, and it'll ultimately will provide the tools for them to onboard to using crypto and stuff. It'll all use the same marketplace. It'll just be that if you don't care to or don't want to, the platform will manage the wallet for you, and you'll have the option to switch it out with your own later or whatever. So cool.
Yeah.
That is super exciting. So overall, if people haven't, make sure you check out the website. Extremely detailed plan of roadmap in different phases. I noticed you've been keeping it really up to date every time you cross something off, which was like I was browsing through it. I quizzed you a little bit earlier before we started recording, but overall, I just love the presentation and clarity of the roadmap and everything you have planned for the project. And while you're there, if you haven't already, why don't you jump and grab a pack? Not financial advice, but I love.
Yeah.
I know, Brandon, you've been from day one a supporter of Icon, a builder on Icon, and it was great to just see when you were launching this project. I know you went for CPS funding, but what I also loved about it is every aspect. You went for CPS funding, it got rejected a couple of times because there was so much going on after CPS had just come back online after a hiatus. And at the same time, though, your project was looking to give back when it did sell. What you've been selling, a percentage goes back to CPS. How much, do you mind if I ask, Brendan, how much as part of the sales does it go back to CPS?
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, so every asset pack sale, 7.5% goes back to the CPS, and so we did receive the funding eventually for the 25,000, and obviously we'll be keeping that in place at least until we pay that back for the 7.5%. But probably forever. I mean, we can make that work, and we love the community enough that, unless there's some dire need to keep the project funded, we'll always be doing that. So.
Yeah. No, look, that's fantastic. I've been quite vocal even in my latest weekly news. I had a bit of a rant, but I've been loving the new trend that's been emerging where we have validators thinking, rather than P-reps thinking, okay, well, we've got this opportunity, kind of create a validator that uses the inflation portion to aid the project and the Icon ecosystem overall that they're working on. And two, if they have gone to CPS for funding, I feel it's just a great look for teams to evaluate and go, how can we give back to what has helped us kick things off? And that give back just goes to fund more people doing more things. So
exactly. Yep. Yeah. That's what I love. I mean, it was it's an easy decision, just because I've been in Gaia-Con for so long. I love it. And wanted to see this network grow, and I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, no, love it. I'm glad you're doing this. I'm excited to see, next couple of weeks, there's going to be a few announcements, as you've said, and I'm excited to see how things evolve.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Thanks for coming on the show, man. Until next time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cool. Everyone, please like, share, subscribe. I hope this has kind of given you a bit more of an overview around what this project's all about. Remember, not financial advice. Thanks, everyone. Take care.